Good morning. I'd like to share with you a reading from Teaching to Transgress. Education is the Practice of Freedom by Bel Hooks. This version is published by Routledge from 1994. It was originally published and recently by Routledge here in the UK. In the chapter Confronting Class in the Classroom, Bel Hooks reflects about her own experiences as a student and learning about class itself. That class was much more than just money, or even etiquette, but certainly social ties. In this book, she's not speaking about culture per se and popular culture. She does in many of her most popular works, but she's directly speaking to us as teachers. And so she writes, "During my college years, it was tacitly assumed that we all agreed that class should not be talked about, that there would be no critique of the bourgeois class biases shaping and informing pedagogical processes as well as social etiquette in the classroom. Although no one ever directly stated the rules that would govern our conduct, it was taught by example and reinforced by a system of rewards implicitly. As silence and obedience to authority were most rewarded, students learned that this was the appropriate demeanor in the classroom. Loudness, anger, emotional outbursts, and even something as seemingly innocent as unrestrained laughter were deemed unacceptable, vulgar disruptions of classroom social order. These traits were also associated with being a member of the lower classes. If one was not from a privileged class group, adopting a demeanor similar to that of the group could help one to advance. It is still necessary for students to assimilate bourgeois values in order to be deemed acceptable." And I think she's here speaking about the fact that we're here on campuses to move up. Most of our students come to university, and most universities in the world, to move up. We assume upward social mobility. And so interestingly, part of that assumption is that the behavior that we, even as professors, tutors, lecturers, demonstrate is what it means to be middle class, and that they would then come to emulate that. Now, in other videos, I speak about talking about difficult subjects like gender, race, and class in the classroom. So if we are ourselves uncomfortable speaking about and don't have the language even to talk about difference in the various spaces that we operate in our different disciplines, then certainly this will be filtered through to the students as the appropriate demeanor, however well-meaning we are. This is also dangerous on two fronts. One, Bel Hooks goes on to say, this is on page 178, bourgeois values in the classroom create a barrier blocking the possibility of confrontation and conflict, warding off dissent. Students are often silenced by means of their acceptance of class values that teach them to maintain order at all costs. When the obsession with maintaining order is coupled with the fear of losing face, of not being thought well of by one's professor and peers, all possibility of constructive dialogue is undermined. Even though students enter the democratic classroom believing that they have the right to free speech, most students are not comfortable exercising this right to free speech. Most students are not comfortable exercising this right, especially if it means they must give voice to thoughts, ideas, feelings that go against the grain, that are unpopular. And when I read this very passage to a group of students last week, was what so many students said. And so certainly I also shared with them that it was my aim that the classroom be open for a place of expression for them to react to the subjects that we speak about, with the understanding that the classroom is where they learn appropriate language to think about and talk about the things that they already know, or perhaps even see or perceive or want to know more about. And that I don't always expect them to speak about these things in an appropriate way. In a sense, not that they're provocative by force, but that they should not use the social decorum as an excuse not to express themselves. And one of the ways that Hooks goes on to speak about breaking this pattern, and not something that I also do, is using vernacular. So I would use vernacular for emphasis, for demonstration, for expression, not as a comic relief per se, sometimes it is, but also to say that the various forms of expression and ways of knowing, most importantly, are welcome and even valued in that space. Bel Hooks has a great many words to say about what she calls soul mortar. this authentic self that we are forced to contend with, either respond to or resist, because of the consumer world that saturates us. Many of those who buy into that, who adopt and really internalize this inauthentic self, we in a sense murder our own selves. And the culture around us really demands that. And she talks about this in terms of racism, gender, and class oppression in the popular narrative. And here she speaks about it in the classroom, and I'll just share that with you. It was assumed that any student coming from a poor or working class background would willingly surrender all values and habits of being associated with this background. She's again talking about the demonization of poverty in the classroom and the academy. Those of us from diverse ethnic racial backgrounds learned that no aspect of our vernacular culture could be voiced in elite settings, like I was saying about how I sometimes use vernacular. What's most interesting, demands that individuals from class backgrounds deemed undesirable surrender all vestiges of their past, create psychic turmoil. We were encouraged, as many students are today, to betray our class origins. And here in the UK, we even hear it with the way that people speak, and I think that they're learning to speak in a way that they are told that privileges them by class. Rewarded if we choose to assimilate, estranged if we choose to maintain those aspects of who we were, some were all too often seen as outsiders. And so students become outsiders both in their home communities, but then also remain on the margins in this space. That's the turmoil she's speaking about. Some of us rebelled by clinging to exaggerated manners and behavior clearly marked as outside that accepted bourgeois norm. During my student years, and now as a professor, I see many students from undesirable, quote, class backgrounds become unable to complete their studies because the contradictions between the behavior necessary to make it in the academy and those that allow them to be comfortable at home with the families and their friends are just too great. There's just too great a gulf. And I think, and what Hooks goes on to explain often, is that what we're really looking for is for a means for students to bridge these different worlds. Because after all, in an internet-connected world, the borders are becoming false, collapsible, transparent. But people also are able to and value moving and shifting between different spaces, including different social, linguistic, cultural spaces. By valuing that in the classroom, we really urge students to not only value their ability to shift in those spaces, to adapt, but we also encourage a sense of empathy, not only for the self and the knowledge that they bring to the classroom, but also for the world around them, to really appreciate difference and to understand that there is something to learn and give in all those radically different spaces. Thank you.